Hi students, today we're going to talk a little bit about vectors. Sometimes scalars and vectors are often confused, so I'm going to just set this straight from the beginning. A scalar is a quantity or distance that has magnitude, which is a fancy name for the length or the size only. So if something has length or size only, then that is considered to be a scalar. Like for instance, Joey moved the book 2 feet, but it doesn't say what direction, 2 feet to the left, 2 feet to the right. It doesn't say what direction, it just says he moved it 2 feet. Now a vector, on the other hand, will tell you not only the magnitude or the length, but it will also tell you the direction in which the object moves. So let's talk about vectors, since that's the topic for the next 2 weeks. A vector is represented by a directed line segment. So this is an example of a vector. The notation looks like this. It's like a half arrow over top. Point O, this point right here, point O, is called the initial point. That's where the vector starts. And point P is called the terminal point. That's where the vector ends. So starts at O, ends at P. It can be denoted by vector V or vector OP. OP. So I would know that the vector starts at O, ends at P. The standard position of a vector starts at 0, 0. That's just common. Vectors don't have to start at 0, 0. They could really start anywhere unless it says draw a vector in standard form. The magnitude is a fancy name for the length or also the size, length or size. Magnitude is the length or the size and denoted by, it looks like absolute value, but when you're talking about vectors, it means the length of vector V. Two vectors are parallel if and only if they have the same or opposite directions. So they would have the same slopes, but different lengths and or directions. So these vectors are all parallel because you can see they have the same slope. They're not necessarily the same length, but they or go in the same direction, but they are parallel because they have the same slope. Two or more vectors whose sum is a given vector are called the components of the vector. So here's vector V, starting with vector V, that's the given vector. This is called the horizontal component, denoted by vector X, and this is called the vertical component, denoted vector Y. And notice these two happen to make a right angle. The amplitude. Amplitude is just a fancy name for the angle between the vector and any horizontal line. Sometimes we use the x-axis if our vector is in standard position. It starts at the origin, and we would say that the amplitude is 45 degrees. And notice that all of these have an amplitude of 45 degrees, therefore that makes them parallel. On the next page, top of page 2, we're just going to cover a couple little things for this first video. We're going to talk about equal vectors. Equal vectors have the same magnitude or length and the same amplitude or direction. All right. And let's talk quickly about the triangle method, which is called the tip to tail method. So we have vector B. Here's vector B. The tip of vector B is attached to the tail of vector A. So here's vector A. So we have vector V. The tip is attached to the tail of vector A. The triangle right here, this vector over here, from the initial point to the terminal point, is called the resultant. We could just use like a little R with a vector symbol. All right, that's it for the first video. Not too bad.